All right. Welcome, Dorsey's Resource. The topic of this video is going to be modern day slavery, open forum Q&A, question and answer. Let's go. Welcome. But first, before I get started really quick, I'd like to give a disclaimer. This video is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Please understand everyone's individual circumstance or situation may be different. It's up to every individual competent person to please do his or her homework and research regarding the matter being discussed. This information is not to be construed as legal advice. In the event you need to seek a competent professional, it is encouraged that you do so at one's own leisure. Dorsey's Resource is not liable or responsible for any misuse of this information. With that being said, all rights are reserved. Now, let's go. So, the topic of this video is like a freestyle. Those of you all joining are welcome to ask questions too, by the way. Also wanted to address once again, very recently I did my last video I did the other day. I removed my #1 video about the Pastor Tony King seminars, all the videos, the main videos that were associated with that out of respect. I did speak to him on a conference call recently. That's about all I can say. I'm going to be speaking cryptically sometime down the line, depending on some things that are supposed to be taking place. Out of respect, I may remove more videos and even contemplate, if they tell me from high up, shut my whole channel down. And this would be like self-censorship, and I just want to be compliant. But before I move in that direction, I kind of want to go hard in some educational information that I know about. And this video is like a freestyle too, by the way. I do have some notes with me, and I want to kind of get some feedback from you all too, if you join in, depending on how many people we get to join in the chat really quick. But like I said, this video is modern day slavery and open forum Q&A. And you might ask, well, what do I mean by modern day slavery? Like, for example, when you think about involuntary servitude, that's another name for slavery, not just prisons. But have you ever thought about these 9-to-5 jobs? You know, some people work day shifts, some people work night shifts, and how they preoccupy your time from being able to do different sorts of habits or hobbies you might like doing. Some people like to draw, work on fashion. Some people are athletic. Some people are musically talented. Some people like to do things physically. And there's many different types of talents and gifts that people have. Some people like to socially network with other people as well, like converse, where they're very extroverted personalities, where they like to throw events or parties. So you have different personalities, different characteristics. But when I'm referring to modern day slavery, also kind of giving you a hint, I'm kind of speaking in code cryptically. But have you ever thought about the reason people have to work these jobs too? Is because they have to pay their bills at the end of the day. You have to keep a roof over your head. You have to keep lights on. If you live in a colder state, you have to pay the gas bill or electric bill to heat up your home or wherever you dwell. If you don't have good insulation, to buy things and commerce out here in modern day society, the Federal Reserve notes that we use too, by the way, which pull out as an example to kind of break down just the modern day dollar bill, which at one time fiat used to say redeemable and lawful money, and even at one time pay to the bearer on demand in silver. You had silver certificates at one time. You even had the United States notes that Kennedy had printed. Remember, he passed an executive order. So just some things to think about. Nobody really pays attention to these serial numbers on the front. Some people think, oh, this just invented itself. It's just made up to look pretty. Interestingly, the dollar bill, even the back part, has a lot of cryptic messages. And you might think, is he talking about that Illuminati stuff, that conspiracy stuff? No, it goes much deeper than that. But there really was an Illuminati that was started in 1776, referred to out of Germany, Bavaria, Germany. by Adam Weishaupt called the Bavarian Illuminati, which he was commissioned by Amschel Rothschild to infiltrate the Freemasons, Freemasonic Lodge. This did happen. This was in the documentary Money Masters. Check out, I believe it's that documentary. Also check out Monopoly Men. There's some other documentaries you can watch for free on YouTube. If you do have the money, you're welcome. Feel free to support those, because some people who risk their life doing the research and stuff to provide this information. But there was historically an incident that took place years ago where the plans were discovered, where there was a mail carrier. Back then they had also used horses to deliver mail, and like some type of storm or something happened, a bunch of letters, debris was found scattered about, and that's how they discovered the letter from Rothschild to Adam Weishaupt. By the way, he was working for Rothschild at the time, and he was like a handler. Rothschild was like his handler, and because of this, Rothschild had to flee, from what I understand, Frankfurt, Germany. They had to move in with the Schiff family because the people there, this is back years ago, discovered the plans too, by the way. But there was a plan in place. When you heard me mention about the jobs and why we work for this almighty Federal Reserve note, which I broke down before, and you guys can look up information online. Don't just take my word for what I say. I encourage my viewers in the disclaimer, please do your research, your homework. What you have, this pyramid on the back, at the top, there's like another, like a pyramid broken off that has like a halo around it, and Annuit Coeptis Novus Ordo Seclorum means in Latin, one world order without God. Annuit Coeptis Novus Ordo Seclorum. I had a book years ago by a former FBI agent named Terry Cook. This book was called The Mark of the Beast, and he broke down that this term translates in Latin, means new world order without God, or one world order without God. And you can barely see, you may have to take a magnifying glass, but at the bottom of the pyramid down here in Roman numerals, that's the year 1776. Interesting what I just mentioned was founded. What else was also founded 1776? The U.S. or U.S. corporation. Are we getting to something? And remember, I kind of went over these serial numbers at the top. Pay attention to the Federal Reserve Bank, and this happens to be G of Chicago. Interesting. And there's different districts that govern different states around the country. Now, I got a question for you guys joining the chat, for a few of you all who are out there watching, too. I'm just wondering, this out of curiosity, it's an honest, sincere question. Where is George Soros getting all this money from? Do you guys out there think that he has a DTC account? Does he have a secret account with the Federal Reserve? Is he pulling this money out the blue? Where did he make all this money up from? Did he earn this money? Did he ever work a grunt job? Where does George Soros get all of these billions? And yes, he really is funding a lot of these different things that are going on, not just from different elections. If you look at, I encourage you, don't take my word, but here's the facts. Go on YouTube and look up the 60 Minutes interview that George Soros did. I would recommend you download it, document it as well. And an eye-opener. But please check that out. That mention how he goes way back to funding crashing economies and stuff. But I'm wondering, like, where does this dude get all this money from to fund these campaigns? This so-called, I hear allegedly, this migrant caravan thing with the UN or whatnot. Beto O'Rourke, who just lost to Ted Cruz, Hillary Clinton's campaign. And I heard he puts like millions and billions. What if that money was used to pay people's property taxes off, their bills, light bills? I think just that guy alone has the ability to end poverty. Wouldn't you think? And he's on the progressive side. If the Republicans, if you think about it, if they're supposed to be the enemies or the bad guys, but this guy George Soros and the Democratic Party gets all of this money, where is he getting it from? I'm asking you guys. Do you guys think he has a DTC account with the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation in New York, or Treasury Direct? How is he pulling these funds, this currency that's attached to digital accounts behind the scenes? Where is he getting this from? And did he earn it? So you guys welcome to join the chat. I'm just curious. So leave it in the comment section. You know, for those of you all, if you don't get a chance to catch this video, because it's saying I only have 5 viewers right now, but if you guys join in, I'm asking out of sincerity. I'm wondering myself, you know, where is he getting all this money from? And not just him, but maybe others. He just happens to be a popular figure. And no, this is not a conspiracy theory, with Snoops.com and Fact Check tried to say that there's this conspiracy. No, it is a fact. Fact Check and Snoops.com, by the way, were created to refute the truth. Reason I know this, I have a friend, he's from Maryland, from a particular city. His brother actually had an organization. I don't remember the name offhand, but my friend recently took me to Open Society Foundation's website. He showed me his brother's name on there. Now, his brother's organization is no longer active or whatever, but my friend, because we had another friend, this guy, he was a Mason, and said, he asked me and my friend, he was with us, we were out in Novi or whatever, Northville, Michigan. He said, where are you guys getting this information? How do you know that George Soros is funding this? And I started to say, your buddy, he's from the same area. His brother works for George Soros, and his other brother found out, they saw the statements that he got like $50,000 or $60,000 in his organization through Open Society Foundation. But the guys had a different nonprofit because they kind of funnel money to these organizations through Open Society Foundation, with Soros and his son Alexander Soros, I hear, took over or is in control of now. But this was some years back. So we know this for a fact. This is not hearsay. This is not spookism. This is not urban legend. This is not made up. You know, and I'm just asking, does he have a sincere agenda? If George Soros is really concerned, is he really concerned about people? I see Supreme Miller in the church. Peace to the God, to you, out of respect. Islam, peace. Good, thanks for joining the chat. Kind of caught me off guard a little bit. Supreme, it's a good brother out there. You know, I wanted to, you know, just out of curiosity, but I'm wondering, you know, when, even when the Mike Brown incident happened, and I noticed the news doesn't say this anymore when they talk about professional protesters. You know, we're referring to Black Lives Matter, which I heard was funded by George Soros, as well as other activist groups such as LGBT, women's rights organizations. The incident earlier this year, March of Our Lives, conveniently after that incident happened at Parkland School down in Florida, they had a permit, which I know March is also Women's Month too. So there's like a correlation where they weaponize all these children to go out and protest. Where did they just get this money from out the blue? Similar to what I hear allegedly of this migrant caravan thing with all these people coming in all of a sudden. Where is George Soros getting this money from? And like I said earlier, to reiterate, my friend, one of my best friends, said his brother, who I never met formally, but I saw his name before he told me years ago, before I knew any of this, had an organization that received money from George Soros. And to the Mike Brown thing, there was an activist who got killed named Darren Seals, who knew Mike Brown's mother, that even talked about this activist that came out of the blue named DeRay McKesson, that came down to Ferguson out the blue. And he said it was real weird how all of a sudden it's like they just co-opted or took over the movement. Just saying out of curiosity, you know, does Soros really care about these activist groups, or does he have their best interest at heart, or is he manipulating the outcome, or wants to see a certain type of outcome from these particular organizations? Just something to kind of think about. And I did say this video is modern day slavery. You know, too, by the way, the breakdown of the dollar bill says, in God we trust. Some people say the God stands for Government Ordnance Division. Already kind of broke down the pyramid. Supreme says, yup, cause it was Mike Brown movement hijacked by Black Lives Matter. Yes, you're correct. Very suspicious. You know, for the big shout out to the people in the St. Louis area. You know, that was a sad, tragic incident. And I was contacted, by the way, on my personal Facebook channel by a subscriber. I kind of woke up to some things too. I'm kind of open-minded, but from a bipartisan approach as far as my political views. I'm not a registered voter, by the way. I do uphold the process of voting. I just don't want to be attached to the negative consequences behind the scenes, because it is a contract. That's a fact. You already have the right to vote. They turned it into, when you register, they turned it into something. Just trying to get this camera adjusted properly. They turned it into, they weaponized it. So when you register, they keep a record, a track of everybody you voted for too. When I picked up several times, I went down there to make sure it had a record of all the people I voted for. And I was like, wow, it just stunned me when I first saw it or whatnot. But that's a whole nother discussion. I don't want to discourage you all. You know, midterms just happened. For those of you all who did vote, make your voice heard. I heard that there was record numbers in Michigan and across the country. There was 52% of the population or whatever that voted overall versus people who are not registered voters. And sometimes people get vote shamed or attacked too, which is not, some considers not right. But remember, you also have religious organizations that don't vote, such as Jehovah's Witnesses, Amish, and other groups that are oftentimes not brought up because certain individuals have an agenda and they want to say, oh, sovereign citizens don't vote, pay taxes, and all of this rhetoric, because they're trying to steer people away from looking into this type of information. Remember, that's an umbrella terminology that's used to discredit people. Because once again, they want to keep you on a plantation. They want to brainwash you. They don't want you looking over here. They don't want the left hand to know what the right hand is doing, and vice versa. They want to keep you programmed. So back to the breakdown of this dollar bill. You have the eagle, which represents a predator. I hear that these 13 leaves, if you count them, these arrows meant they took these colonies by force. Big shout out to you. Thank you for confirming, Supreme indeed. Yes, sir. And these stars represent victory. It's the reason. Also, I hear the United States represents a trust connected to England and Rome, the Vatican. The Vatican represents the religious arm of the world. England represents the financial arm of the world. The United States represents the military arm of the world. You know, we have one of the most powerful militaries in the entire world. And England is known for its financial arm. If you study, like I mentioned, that movie Money Masters, and you find out where the Rothschilds originated from, when Amschel Bauer sent his 5 sons around the world to start the central banking systems, and why these central banks in these different countries are used. Yes, 3 crown city-states. Yep, different way of putting it, but yes, sir, that form a part of the trust, and the Vatican being a religious arm of the world, you know, as well. So just something to think about with this control mechanism and modern day slavery. We know Muammar Gaddafi, and that here before, you know, was connected to that whole, remember, Benghazi incident, that he was trying to start a gold-backed currency for Africa, but he was taken out, removed before it could totally, fully go through, by the way. And even Farrakhan at the time had some words that he did not approve of President Obama allowing troops to go in and do what they did to Gaddafi. And I hear Hillary Clinton also benefited as well off of that. And Gaddafi, not saying he was perfect earlier on, you know, the CIA, FBI, the deep state, the bad guys of the government, not the good guys, the good cabal, but the evil, bad cabal, I hear put Gaddafi in power and many of these dictators. For example, the movie Last King of Scotland, based off of Idi Amin, the dictator of Uganda years ago, played by the actor Forrest Whitaker, who played in, what's that movie, Black Panther. Yep, check out, I still got to check it out, Last King of Scotland. It was based off the dictator of Uganda, Idi Amin. I hear he was ruthless. This was some relatives told me when I was watching the documentary, but they put all these dictators in, from Mao Zedong. He went to Harvard University. Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, went to school in Switzerland. You know, Mao Zedong was known for the Tiananmen Square incident. He was known for calling activists in to say he wanted to work things out and discuss, you know, relations, and then he would turn on them. He was known for the massacre and being very ruthless and getting rid of old traditions and really further implementing the hardcore communism in China that they're still going through to this day. They don't like to talk about that. The big tech company Apple is in bed with, and Google, with the sweat factories and children being tied up to trees and people working 12 hours a day which they want to bring socialism, communism here to America to drive the wages down and drive out the middle class and bring us to a third world status, because the globalists feel when people are poor, they're easier to control. Modern day slavery tied in with banking. You see where I'm kind of going? All of this is starting to tie in. And I would also say, I brought a book with me too, by the way. A lot of people ask, why is the black community? Because instead of calling this video Black History, I wanted to kind of make it more universal, because I do understand I have a diverse group of subscribers and I appreciate you guys. I normally didn't cover these topics in the past, but I want to deconstruct and decompartmentalize why a lot of minorities and black people are programmed. And I suggest to a lot of, because I do have a lot of black subscribers, YouTube allows me to see the certain portions according to the settings, those who allow themselves to be seen, visible. So I know there's a lot of brainwashing too, but I highly recommend to my black African-American subscribers, melanated people, to get this book called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. It's called How Jews Gain Control of the Black American Economy, produced by the Nation of Islam. And no, I'm not a member of the Nation of Islam. I don't belong to any organizations. A friend of mine told me about this book from a guy, a Prince Hall Freemason that we know, recommended. He said he wouldn't go into the detail, but he said refer to this book. A friend of mine told me, this is part 2, but the original version goes into how the Jews played a role during the transatlantic slave trade. Because keep in mind, when a lot of black people don't know the difference, they just put them in a general category when they say white people, but there's different nationalities, different ethnic groups of white people who don't get along with each other necessarily. Just like the Jews are a particular ethnic group, just like you have the Italians, you have the Welsh people, the Irish people, European, and I'm talking about Caucasian Jews too, by the way. I see Supreme posted a message. I believe Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That's excellent. Supreme, I am familiar with, I got to get that book by John Perkins. I'm familiar with the concept because I did see Zeitgeist Addendum, by the way. So very well studied to show, you know, I have a good memory, but I highly recommend this book. This happens to be part 2. This was released years later. And I know some people out there saying Farrakhan came under some scrutiny some years ago. And by the way, he was at Aretha Franklin's funeral. And it's the reason why he was there. He knew Aretha Franklin because years ago, they're not telling you, and the black liberal controlled media is not explaining that Farrakhan was good friends with Aretha. They actually reached out to each other years ago. There was an incident that was going on, I believe sometime in the 60s. There was a tumultuous time period, and they were teaming up. Aretha was kind of like part of the Black Underground Railroad. It dawned on me one day, I was meditating at work, and I said, Aretha Franklin, with that funeral, was something else, because I could relate to that funeral a lot, by the way. Even though I grew up in the church, I don't attend regular church anymore. By the way, that's neither here nor there. In terms of my spirituality, I'm very grounded or whatever. You know, I was forced to go, but I could really relate. But it started to dawn on me because some people were asking about this guy named Reverend Jim Holley at the funeral. And I won't go into the details, but I noticed some things. I asked a relative of mine. I said, I saw some people comment on Facebook, some other melanated people, my brothers and sisters out there who were asking questions and said, who is Bishop Reverend Jim Holley? And a relative of mine said he was the one that had the historical church on Woodward and Claremont. And I said, oh, if you know historically, Woodward is the dividing line of the city. By the way, if you live in Detroit, you know that it splits the east side from the west side, I guess geographically from the map. So that's cryptic. There's some cryptic things kind of going on. And if you know from slavery times, there were certain groups that helped protect black slaves during slavery. I hear the Pilgrims, the Amish were like a group. I'm not sure too much about the Mennonites. Don't quote me. I'm not deeply, I have to check. I have friends of mine that are historians. I mean, they're really good that I cross-reference Like in my discipline, I'm an expert at, they'll check with me because they know I'm an expert in that discipline. But when it comes to history and I need to brush up or something I'm unsure about, I check with them. I have very credible friends who very well study, by the way, study political science, economics, history, and also from my aspect, banking. But this book talks about, too, how Jews even played a role with the Jim Crow laws, too, by the way. Like the Democratic Party was organized by members of the Ku Klux Klan. This is a historical fact. A lot of black people are not familiar with this. Let me say this again. The Democratic Party was organized by members, created by members of the Ku Klux Klan. And this book gets into the bloodlines. Like black people, you have to study last names. Like these last names that we have, like my last name, Dorsey, by the way, is not my true indigenous last name or doesn't connect me with my lineage. And let me explain why. There's a movie called Roots that a lot of black people are into or like, and was airing because they were pushing a certain agenda some years when Obama was in office, but they weren't telling you certain things. They made us take these English names to separate us. Many African Americans, black people, melanated people in this country have been domesticated. By the way, this is a fact. By the way, because for example, I heard a caller call in to some years back to Alex Jones' show and said, why aren't a lot of more black people woke up? He was upset. And it's because I have to be honest, and this is not victimhood talk. I'm just speaking historically, that a lot of African Americans been domesticated, been stripped. We were forced to take English names. You were forced to take the slave master's name. Yahoo News actually had an article some years back that there was a guy named Colonial Anderson down in Tennessee, one of those states. Don't quote me on it. I believe it was Tennessee. He had a plantation. One of his slaves escaped, and his slave who escaped had the same last name, Anderson. So remember, the slaves had to take on the last name of whoever the owner of that plantation was. This is a historical fact. Like in the movie Roots, remember he said, Kunta Kinte said the master was whipping him and said, your name is Toby. And he said, Kunta Kinte, he kept beating him, and that was like a significant portion of that movie. Kids used to joke around when I was in elementary school years ago, but it wasn't a laughing matter when this was going on. Of course, to the ancestors doing slavery, and I say to them, people who fought during the struggle, no disrespect, just going over this information, because a lot of black people don't get the full perspective. This is by design, why they never wanted minorities or black people in particular to have economic power. This is why foreigners, when they come over here, there's a lot of black people, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of mixing that goes on. We're going hard for a lot of immigrants that are not legal citizens, but yet a lot of foreigners were given a tax incentive and loans from banks, which at one time blacks would pay into insurance companies, and banks would not would redline black people that tried to get houses in certain areas. They would not issue loans to black people. And insurance companies, as black people would still pay in, they wouldn't cover when black people had a fire or something happened years ago. They were known for not keeping their word to, how do you say it, to file when a claim is filed. Like they wouldn't, you know, fulfill the promise, but minorities, blacks at the time would still pay into it. So the insurance companies and banks for a long time, this is why they've kept a lot of certain urban areas poor. There's no excuse as to some of the leaders that drove some of these liberal cities into the ruins too. They have some responsibility too with all the lobbying and corruption. That's a whole nother topic within itself. No excuse, but I'm just saying this did play a role partially in some of the economic hindrance dealing with the black community, while a lot of black people have to depend on working for white people or big corporations, or don't own properties and things of that state, like real estate, houses, apartment complexes, and stuff like that, because banks and insurance companies were in bed with one another to suppress black people in particular years ago. So this is not victimhood talk. I'm just going over history, facts. These were discriminatory practices and methods against black people. This doesn't get talked about. Some of the older generation of black people are aware and don't really speak about it anymore. I had to ask these questions, by the way. And the reason a lot of black people switched over to the Democratic Party was, of course, I talked about a little bit about this before, during the time when John F. Kennedy was in office. Him and his brother Robert were the few. They reached out to black people, by the way. So black people at the time, they understood. Malcolm X during this time period said the Democratic Party was more racist than the Republican Party, and he made a distinction even back then. You can look it up. It's a fact online, a quote. And black people said they figured they would take the lesser of two evils, because Kennedy said he was one of the few that said the blacks are being done wrong, and there were some other incidences that took place. So it caused a lot more significant portion to switch over. And then from the benefits, of course, Lyndon Baines Johnson, when they signed the Civil Rights Act, which he was a deep state operative, by the way, you can look up this quote online. He stated he'll have black people, and he used the N-word, voting Democrat for the next 200 years. So they had a plan in place, because the social programs were not designed to last forever. They're taxpayer, government funded, by the way. And the Republicans at the time, they were against it, but they felt they had to do something temporarily. So black people understood it was just a temporary fix. It was a Band-Aid, when black people really should have received reparations. That's why the other portion of black people haven't switched back over to the Republican Party, because they feel like the damage was never fully corrected. There was just a Band-Aid that was put on a problem, because unlike other ethnic groups, I'm not saying it would be the end-all be-all, but they received something, and black people overall never got anything. Like the Native Americans got casinos, the Chinese railroad workers, from what I understand years ago, got something. The Japanese from the Pearl Harbor incident were compensated. So the Native Americans, they got reservations, casinos, and some other things. I'm not saying that this would make the culture a utopia, or it was the end-all be-all solution, but these other groups received reparations. And of course, Jews, and during Obama's administration, he actually increased reparations for Jews overseas, for something that happened overseas, not for something, the slavery that black melanated people endured over here in America, by the way. So that's one of the reasons. It's a complex subject. So speaking out of bipartisanship, whatever, I'm just going over history, by the way. You can look everything I'm up saying, get your own analysis. I recommend don't take my word for what I'm saying, but just something to take a look at, by the way. So this video was, once again, I was just looking for my specific notes. Again, so they offered these social programs, when instead some blacks felt they should have received reparations. This only put a Band-Aid on the problem, so black people just said, we'll take what we can at the time. So that's why they got comfortable with the welfare state. And then the welfare state was weaponized. They also were able to use it as a tool to steer black women away from the civil rights movement, because it also scared a significant portion of white people at the time during the 60s. Some of the white people, or Caucasian people, that you saw marching with Martin Luther King were Jewish, by the way. Something, because black people can't distinguish the different ethnic groups of white people that don't get along with each other, such as the Irish people, Germans, Italian. And then in the movie Godfather, a friend of mine told me about some years ago. I didn't really watch the series, but I'm familiar with the concept, the Italian mafia. They said in one of the Godfather movies that sell the drugs to black people, they act like animals or something like that. That was quoted in one of the movies. So that's how these other groups benefited and profited off of us, by the way. So black people have been used as a pawn, as permanent minorities, when the slave masters in society, by the way, is not just white people in general, Irish people, or Germans, or Scottish, by the way. I recommend get this book for minorities, black people, Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. And by the way, the guy that snitched on me at my job, the security company that I work for, his name was Nico Reedy, and I noticed he knew a white guy that was Caucasian named Tim Wood, and my friend who studies the bloodlines, the last name said Timothy Wood, which is like in the Bible, because Christianity is the front religion for Judaism, by the way, which come from years ago, the indigenous books, like if you know about the Imperu, the Pentateuch, the Septuagint, the Torah, and the Tanakh, and what is it? Some of the other books come after that, like the earlier, like just like you had the parent languages, you have to go back and study. But the modern day Judaism, it comes from the indigenous people had it originally. The Caucasian Jews, Ashkenazis, and Khazarian Jews converted to Judaism. This is a key word, they converted. So when I'm referring to in this book, the modern day Jews that Jay-Z talked about on his album 444, while they own a lot of the apartment complexes, properties across the United States, you can look it up. Check out this book, The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. But the reason I brought that coworker up, he knew this white guy who was actually of Jewish descent, by the way. Be back 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Thank you guys for waiting. The reason I brought this up is for evidence. I actually experienced this. You know, when I had to remove a certain amount of my YouTube videos where I was wearing my security uniform, and he knew it was in alignment with this guy, and I was wondering why they came over to one of the sites one day I had an alarm response at, and he said, Reedy's a good friend of mine. And they both no longer work for the company, but I found out around that time period, one of the vehicles that I had to work in for my job, someone cut the catalytic converter, which I found out from my sensei that trained me in martial arts, that this was sabotage purposely done by somebody, that it can cause, when you run the heat in the vehicle and you have all the windows rolled up, this can cause carbon monoxide poisoning. And also a few days later, someone stuck a razor blade in the door handle. Now, I wasn't scared of nothing like that, because I would defend myself, do whatever is necessary, by the way. But these are intimidation tactics. Obviously, somebody did not like my political views, but he was the person that I had told prior to the job contacting me that I was doing YouTube videos. And when I met with the director at the time, when she retired, and by the way, her last name was Berg, which is a German name that means mountain. So Ashkenazi deals with the German Caucasian Jews, and Khazarian deals with the Russian Khazarian Jews, by the way. This is why I said I recommend all black people, minorities, get this book called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. Many minorities, black people, you're being used as pawns. The modern day masters, the slave plantation owners of our modern day society are Caucasian Jews, either Ashkenazi or Khazarian, or etc. And Zionist means the upper echelon ones that are like the Illuminati, that it's not a coincidence why they control the banking system, the Federal Reserve, the Treasury. Look at Ben Bernanke, former Secretary of Treasury Jacob Lew, Timothy Geithner, Janet Yellen. These are Jewish names, Caucasian Jewish names, not a coincidence. You got to study also, like the last names, like Robinson means son of Robin. Friend of mine was breaking down the etymology, and even you have to study foreign languages too, by the way, behind these names. So this coworker of mine that snitched on me or whatever, he knew this guy, so it shows, and he had connections to Prince Hall Freemasonry too, by the way, which is also talked about in part 2 of this book I just discovered. But I read excerpts before I purchased this book, and it shows there's also connection with Freemasonry. That's how they infiltrate, by the way. So it's not a coincidence that, like, recently Debbie Stabenow, who won in Michigan, that happens to be a Jewish name, by the way. She beat John James. She was an incumbent, but's been in office for like over 40-something years. Seriously, that's a long time. You know, and certain individuals talking about setting term limits, but that's a Jewish name. And Debbie comes from, also connected to Deborah. Friend of mine breaks down the ideology, because I didn't know this at first, the etymology and what these names mean. See, I'm kind of giving you hint, speaking cryptically, but I'm showing you the modern day controllers of this system, that, you know, when they don't like your political views, why are they always coming after this? You know, this is a form of economic terrorism. This is a form of financial oppression. targeting people. These are discriminatory practices. So something needs to be done about the Federal Reserve and the criminality that they're doing. And I asked the question earlier. You guys are welcome to give me feedback. Where is Soros getting all this money from? Is he pulling this out of thin air? Is he using fractional reserve banking? I want to know, because this is not fair. This is economic financial terrorism. This is forced economic oppression. This is cruel to do and to target certain groups of people. This is discriminatory. This is racism, what they call racism. But see, a lot of people aren't paying attention to some things. But I'm giving you the breakdown, and don't take my word for what I'm saying. I experienced this. That's why I told that story earlier. And I'm not afraid to mention other real names of actual people, by the way. I see Supreme said economic genocide. And by the way, the story I was telling that happened at my job, those people are the real agents, because I don't belong to any secret societies, by the way. I didn't go through official initiation. Now, I have people I do know that I have admitted that I know were Masons. I was going to pledge in college to be a Sigma, but I never officially crossed over because the due money for dues was too expensive. But I studied a lot of books and things, and this is why I brought this book with me, and I highly recommend it. And by the way, Farrakhan and Nation of Islam said this, his historical research department did this. This is in their own writings that they admitted, by the way. The Caucasian Jews. So if they try to say this is anti-Semitic, no, I'm already mixed. Semitic means to be mixed, semi, a part of. And there's actually a tribe in Africa referred to as the Semites. And there was a group of Caucasians that went to Ethiopia, and they said they were wondering why they were practicing the same form of Judaism, because it came from them originally. Melanated people, indigenous. You know, people are melanated. We are the original man. That's where you get the term aboriginal. We're the original people. I had melanin. So I'm talking about when I say Jews, I'm referring to Caucasian Jews, and specifically Ashkenazis. But the Zionists have also enslaved and killed many of their own people. They're the controllers at the very top that run these people. That people below them are their underlings or henchmen. Like if you ever played video games and you have the bad guys, they call them henchmen. Like the people that work for Joker, those would be referred to as his henchmen, his underlings, his bad guy. Or those are the deep state operatives, like within our government. They work for people in the shadow government behind the scenes that you can't see, that are the controllers that are manipulating things. This is facts I'm going over. This is not conspiracy theory, theoretical. This is facts. There's a difference between the two. You know, factual, and I'm giving you, you know, the evidence to look it up. So this was in their own writings. You know, by the way, when his research department went through, this was documented. So they did it just like a research paper. When I was in high school, you had to cite your sources. So they know that there's not plagiarism, by the way. So they cited their sources. This is in their own writings by Caucasian, Ashkenazi, Khazarian Jews. They admitted their own admission. So they can't lie about it. They can't deny it. It's facts. So I'm just did this video. This is why a lot of black people, in my opinion, are brainwashed and don't know and understand true history, political science. And this is just one portion. By the way, so those social programs were designed to run out the welfare back in the 60s. They wanted to break up the civil rights movement. They also pacified black people offering civil service jobs. They also pushed black exploitation movies in the 70s, like Dolomite, Mac, the movie Mac, these pimping movies. They pushed drugs in the black community. They drafted a disproportionate amount of black men into the Vietnam War, which when Martin Luther King started speaking out against, Lyndon Baines Johnson started calling King the N-word preacher. This is a fact. When King had just won the Nobel Peace Prize a year or two prior or whatever, and then after that, when he started speaking up about the truth, he became the bad guy, similar to how Trump was a hero years ago. Got all sorts of photos with all sorts of people years ago, from Rosa Parks to Aretha Franklin, and he's become the boogeyman because he's gone against the power structure, the deep state, the shadow government, the controllers of the system. So it's not a coincidence. These people that I'm referring to control the banking system. Sports, look at the NBA. Adam Silver, Jewish name. David Stern, former commissioner, Jewish name. Roger Goodell in the NBA. In the NFL, I mean, Goodell, NFL, Jewish name. Entertainment, Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein. Why a lot of lawyers, famous lawyers, Jeffrey Feiger. It's not a coincidence. This is monopoly, and why some of these prosecutions and police officers were not getting convicted too, by the way, ties in with the court system too, which some black people weren't looking at, by the way, with prosecutors and stuff. The control mechanism, monopolies. They have some reason why to have fairness and balance in law, for proper rule of law, by the way. Thank you, Supreme, for confirming exactly. So I'm not an agent, but I'm exposing, like when I told that story about my job, I said years ago, I'm eventually reveal the names of people, and I'm watching, I'm paying close attention to any gatekeepers and government agents out there giving misinformation and disinfo. So I'm a realist. This is facts. I normally know I didn't talk like this or didn't talk about these topics in the past, but don't let the smooth taste fool you. Mama didn't raise a fool. Now, I didn't come out my mother's womb knowing this information. I had to do research, and I think it's different levels of being awake to the truth. And I'm like up there, like you have to have a high IQ and have an open mind. It's not difficult, but you have to have an open mind and be willing to do the research and investigate, which I encourage a lot of people to do, not just black people, minorities, but you have to delve deeper. You can't just be a weekend warrior. Oh yeah, Steve Coakley would be proud of you, as I am, brother. Salute. Thank you. I'm in no comparison, because I don't even talk about this. Some blacks don't even consider me to be pro-black. They'll say, because some of the videos I did in the past, they would say, oh, nigga, you cooning, forgive my speech, or whatever. And for certain topics I cover, but I draw information from multiple sources. But rest in peace to Steve Coakley. Shade to the brother. He contributed to a lot of research. I even think, by the way, Alex Jones, I think, knew who Steve Coakley was. And in my opinion, I think Alex Jones, just my opinion, I don't have any evidence on this, I think he got some of his information from Steve Coakley. Rest in peace, Steve Coakley was an awesome pioneer that exposed these agents. And also, when you see some of these black people who are married to white people, some of them are Jewish. By the way, this is how they infiltrate. When some black people were asking, how did Black Lives Matter, which was started by 3 lesbian women, when it's not black men, using black men as a prop, but we're not really benefiting just the spoils of these protests and stuff overall. Now, some changes were happening, but it always goes back. I even heard black women mention, and they had a secret discussion about this. It says Black Lives Matter was started by a white man. Okay, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, because it has deep ties in with Soros. But the lady who confronted Dr. Umar in Kansas, if you remember that, refer back to that, Supreme, when she said, and she admitted she was lesbian or whatever, and she was trying to find out what Umar's political views were, because they have an agenda to break apart the family structure. Like when Don Lemon recently on CNN tried to say white men are the enemy, but Don Lemon doesn't represent me, by the way, and a lot of black men that I know. He's part of the fake news propaganda, and he dates a white man. He's a homosexual that dates a homosexual white man. No disrespect, but I'm saying you don't represent me. I love women. I would like to get married one day. So this is propaganda. Don Lemon, you don't represent me, by the way. So I understand it's not a perfect situation, what we have, but it doesn't mean that all white people are evil, to label people like that. And that's actually considered more racist for him to say that. It's more derogatory in that terminology he put it, but he don't represent the rest of us melanated brothers across the country. So don't let that fool you. And I did see some other YouTube channels that addressed this, that brought this up about Don Lemon, by the way. So I'm just saying they're running game because they want black people, when they want you on a plantation, they want you programmed. They don't want you knowing about the secret relationship, how some black people and women have this connection to Jews, to secret societies, Freemasons, and they're making big money off these campaigns, you know, making big moolah to keep you programmed and brainwashed. By the way, it's not a coincidence, you know, that this has been, you know, this is by design, by the way, you know. So with that being said, you know, I've been on here for a while, talking about, you know, modern day slavery. This was also open Q&A, but nobody really jumped in. Big shout out to Supreme for those who had questions. I do appreciate the thumbs up out there. You know, give me the thumbs up. It lets the haters know you support me. Even if you don't totally agree with my political views, you're welcome to leave a comment. You know, I don't normally talk about this topic, but this is why to let white people, Caucasians who are watching this video know, this is why a lot of black people are still programmed. They are waking up. And I appreciate all the black people out there that are waking up to the real truth. But we all just need to wake up in general and make this a level playing field. So it's not people hiding behind a mask, but it's people that are awake to the truth, that stand for truth, freedom, and not manipulation and propaganda. That, you know, Snoops.com and Fact Check was created to refute the news. You know, but I was going to talk a little bit more about the Sith said, I gave you a thumbs up and we'll share this video, bro. Thank you, Supreme. Big shout out to you. Much love. Greatly appreciated. And once again, rest in peace to Steve Coakley. He was a pioneer. You can check out his videos, by the way, in case you don't, those of you who never heard of him before. He exposed how there was black people years ago who were going to Howard, some men who were, it may have been some women too, who were going to Howard University, which is a black college down in DC, and they were going into engineering and they weren't getting their degrees, but they were highly intelligent. And he found out, he was working for the mayor of Chicago. He was asked, like an investigative journalist, to investigate the reason why, and he found out it was an infrastructure that was connected to the Jews, the Caucasian Jews, Ashkenazi and Khazarian and Zionists or whatever, control the black community that was behind the founding of the NAACP. All of the black fraternities and sororities, the AKAs, the Alphas, the Omegas, they were behind a lot of these organizations. Another fact is, I learned this from a friend of mine who's very well studied in history. The first black nationalist organization was created during slavery times, was the Black Hebrew Israelites. Let me say that again. The first black nationalist organization was started to spy on other black people, was the Black Hebrew Israelites during slavery times. So I noticed this guy brought up, it's not a coincidence, this co-worker that snitched on me told me, did you ever explain why to rescind the voter registration, Cinnamon Jones? You know what, I really didn't go into the details. Thank you, Cinnamon, for joining. This is the first question that I have in the Q&A to kind of shift gears a little bit. No, I didn't completely. If you're curious, interested, thank you for confirming, Supreme. Yup, in the 1800s. But to answer Cinnamon's your question, the voter registration, one of the reasons it is, like I said earlier, see, our ancestors fought. A lot of black people, they will vote shame you. They'll say, well, our ancestors died for the right to vote, so how dare you? How could you? But some other black people are woke to the truth, and they call that vote, that's shaming. You know, whatever. That's not good. But they fought for civil rights, which civil rights legally was animal rights, so falls up under different categories, different versus human rights. Like they say, Martin Luther King was more so for civil rights. Malcolm X originally fought more so for human rights. There was a difference where Malcolm X felt like, if you smack me on the cheek, then I have the right to smack you back. That was Malcolm X's general philosophy. But him and King, they started to line up before they died. They started to politically align. I had a white Caucasian history teacher at the Christian school I went to years ago named Mr. Forster, that actually brought this up in my history class. He was one of my favorite history teachers. By the way, I went there to that school from 5th grade up to 9th grade, Mr. Forster. By the way, he was Caucasian. He brought this up about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, whatever. It says the voting for fraud by the colonists. Yeah, I heard Dr. Boyce Watkins, I think, talking about this too. I haven't been a registered voter since 2004, even though I felt, in my opinion, that if I would have voted in the 2016 election, that I personally would have voted for Trump. That's just I felt for the black community, he was a lesser two evils. And I've said, you know, it doesn't matter. I have a relative, I have a lot of liberals in my family that I know voted for Hillary Clinton, and I don't lose any sleep over it, whatever. It's a complex subject. It's not perfect. But I know a lot of black activists from years ago that didn't support Hillary Clinton, such as Sister Soldier, Michelle Alexander, that wrote the book The New Jim Crow, encouraged black people not to vote for Hillary. Michael Imhotep from the African History Network, he didn't support Hillary Clinton. That didn't mean they necessarily supported Trump, but they damn sure didn't support Hillary Clinton because of what her husband did with the 3 strikes you're out, the prison thing. That's a fact. Who else out there? Dr. Boyce Watkins, even. There was others. So that was just my opinion. By the way, if I voted recently, I would have been bipartisan in Michigan's election. Whatever, I would have voted for Gretchen Whitmore and Gilchrist, and then I would have voted for John James for senator. I wouldn't have voted for Stabenow. I think you needed fresh blood, even though Stabenow got back in. I would have been split when it comes to that. They call that being bipartisan. It says we must bring back the republic and enforce the Constitution. Yes, when I woke up years ago to the Moors, the Nubian nation of Moors, they were having a meeting with the Hebrew Israelites and this group of Yamasee Moors that was connected to the Native Americans. When I first woke up on the east side of Detroit, they stated that this country was based on a republic. They were explaining the difference between a republic society versus a democratic society. And the reason why we needed to be a republic, they went into the details. So I am kind of aware of that history, the philosophy. By no means am I an expert or whatnot. But I do know about the 14th Amendment contract. Now, going back to finish explaining Cinnamon Jones' question, the voter registration is a contract behind the scenes. It's connected to your driver's license. By the way, also being an organ donor. These are called adhesion contracts behind the scenes. And I'm going to give you a secret, by the way, for a lot of minorities out there, when you're a registered voter and you wondering why you're getting pulled over by the police or you're getting pulled in for jury duty in certain states is different versus different states, and different places have different rules. It makes you more public when they look up your status behind the scenes, which the State Department has you classified. I won't go into the deep details about that. That's a whole nother discussion, but they do have you listed at a certain status, and it ties in when you look up the laws behind the voter registration. I have to do my research again. I looked it up a long time ago, and deals with status, the specific laws that govern the voting registration process. By the way, it talks about status. Like, look up the word status, by the way. And what I know Kanye was talking about 13th Amendment, but look up 14th Amendment and slavery and what it meant. Also look up the Dred Scott case in the Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition. It's called the Dred Scott case. Look that up. The definition is in the Black's Law. Thanks Supreme for confirming. Black's Law 6th edition, which I have a copy of. I used to speak about it years ago at these classes I would go to privately. And this is a law book that lawyers have to use to pass the bar exam. Yep, status and jurisdiction. Status, jurisdiction, and adjudication. Yep, I did study under some Moors, even though I'm not a member of the Moorish Science Temple, by the way. I'm just, I don't belong to any organizations, just showing this is what I study independently, and I network with different people, by the way. So I'm not pushing the agenda. I'm just, for educational purposes, I'm trying to help educate minorities, blacks, and explain to white people, too, why there's still a lot of black people who are programmed and brainwashed, and why they want to keep a lot of minorities and black people on a plantation, by the way. And I went over very powerful information, and I'll refer once again this book and part 1 of this book. You can purchase it on Amazon and eBay, by the way. The secret relationship between blacks and Jews. And once again, it was research was done by the Nation of Islam's Historical Research Department, and this is out of their own writings from the Ashkenazi, Khazarian, Caucasian Jews, out of their own literature, facts, their own writings. They just put it together and explain how they try to keep this information secret, but they control Hollywood, the entertainment industry, sports, the banking system. That's the modern day slave masters. So and the internet, I forgot the tech giants. Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, Eric Schmidt with Google, Alphabet, Google's parent company. That's Ashkenazi German name, Zuckerberg. That could be Khazarian. I'm not sure. That may be Ashkenazi. It's not a coincidence why they're censoring certain people. Look at their bloodlines. Study what these last names mean. Like Jackson, son of Jack. Robinson, son of Robin. Look up Levi, Leviathan. Salazar. Look up the meaning of these last names. Like my last name, Dorsey. That's an Irish, a European name. Do I look like an Irish European man? No, I'm a melanated Aboriginal man of color. I'm not. That's a plantation. That's a government slave name that was passed down. I do have an indigenous name. I won't say what that is. I did do a lawful name change correction, which you can lawfully do, and it was ran in a paper that makes it law, because when it's not rebutted after 30 days, done by affidavit, it becomes law. When it's not rebutted, it stands as truth in commerce, an affidavit. But it was ran in the Legal News, by the way, my indigenous name. I won't say, but I do have that. It is on record. But Dorsey, do I look like an Irishman, a European, Caucasian? No relation to Jack Dorsey of Twitter, but that is my last name. But you can tell they're not telling you this. Black people need to research what these last names mean, where they come from. Like the name, like Hilton, the Hill Town, like the T-O-N at the end was like an acronym, though they lived on top of the hill. Generally, the wealthy or rich people that had a higher status lived on the top of the hill or in higher altitudes. The poor people lived lower down the valley, closer to the water, because the water generally, when you study landscape and geography, the lower altitude is where you'll find where the water is at, but the higher altitudes, like the hills. That's why across the country, and a lot of the places that have hills after the name, like Beverly Hills, Michigan, or Rochester Hills, Michigan, or Beverly Hills, California, it's associated with wealth, people who are rich, because they were higher class people. They had a higher status. Check out the meaning of the last name Smith. Goldsmiths. You also had gunsmiths, whatever, or swordsmiths. They made the swords. That's why in modern day society, it's not a coincidence if certain smiths go into becoming a mechanic, a police officer, because historically they did stuff with their hands. Look up, these last names had meanings. Some of these names meant they came from a place. They may have, some of these last names may have been Scottish, German, Welsh, Irish, or Jewish, just to name a few ethnic groups, or Italian. It's important to study, like even the mafia families, the Gambinos, they come from the Sicilian mafia. When you start understanding, some of them have our melanated blood and know some of our history, by the way. You know, when you look and study in the bloodlines with these last names, what they mean, where these nationalities come from, you know, the original Sicilian families. And then you also have different Jewish groups within these ethnic groups too, by the way, different variations. Like some would say, like the name DiMambro that has the D in front of it says, what about him? What about Henry as a last name? I don't know offhand what Henry means, by the way. That could be, sounds like it's Welsh. But you also have, remember, the pigs, Portugal, Ireland, Greece. Like Greece, they have a nationality, and Scottish. The pigs, that's an acronym for Portugal, Ireland, Greece, or Spain. Or could be, and remember, you have Scottish people as well, by the way. Like Trump is not just German, he has Scottish descent too. They're like the second in the pecking order too, because I didn't get into when some of the Jews mix with black people, by the way, and it's not a coincidence how the Social Security numbers, why certain light-skinned or more fair-skinned black people get better corporate jobs or higher paying jobs, because they're mixed with German or have part Jewish in them or whatever, because German Jew or Ashkenazi is higher in the pecking order, and then Scottish is like second, and then below that might be Italian or whatever, or Grecian, and it's like a order. But remember, some of these different white people, Caucasian people, they don't get along with each other. See, black people are not distinguished in that because they haven't studied etymology or foreign languages where these last names derive from. That's how they're brainwashing us. You see, by the way, so I know I'm going in depth. This is a high-powered information. And once again, this book, Get Part 1, this is Part 2, can be purchased on Amazon or eBay, called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, How Jews Gain Control of the Black American Economy, put on by the Nation of Islam, which I don't belong to. It says, no to change the subject, but what are your thoughts on David Icke? He talks about this too. My thoughts on David Icke, I know some people call him the reptilian man or the reptilian guy, but he talks about, he has very credible research. He's done lectures around the world. He's based out of the UK. He used to be a star soccer player years ago, but very good historian overall. At this African Conscious bookstore, historically at the first historical mall in Southfield, Michigan at Northland Mall. I used to buy some of my books there, called the True Bookstore. They actually carried David Icke's books, by the way, at a Black conscious bookstore. By the way, even though I think I got my books from David Icke Books from Borders. By the way, this is before I really woke up to knowing as much as I do now. And David Icke helped me connect a lot of the dots. He talked about the child pedophilia that goes on. He was on point. He was talking about it years ago, about the rituals and things of that sort, which is too esoteric for some people to handle, or too graphic, which I understand. But David Icke's very credible researcher. Not saying that you necessarily can co-sign everything he says, just like Alex Jones, but I have looked at his research and cross-reference, and he helped me connect the dots with how Freemasons and different secret societies infiltrated religions, like how Albert Pike, who started the Ku Klux Klan, was a Freemason, how Charles Taze Russell, who started the Watchtower Society, known as the modern-day Jehovah's Witnesses, he was a Freemason and a Rosicrucianer, how Joseph Smith, that started the Mormons, was a Freemason. And if you remember the connection that I drew earlier, and the guy that snitched on me at my job and his connections to the Jews and Freemasonry, and his book talks about it after page 408, talks about the Freemasonic connection, because that's how they infiltrate. A lot of Freemasons, people who belong to secret societies, act as spies, by the way, and they help also keep in alignment with the programming and brainwash. And that's why when in the movie Black Panther, what's the actor that played Michael B. Jordan? Killmonger, when he played Killmonger, and he took over temporarily, and the one sister who used to work for the king, forget his name, the other actor, you know who I'm talking about, the one that played the main Black Panther character. But after he took over, that she had to obey, because she represented like the Eastern Stars, that they have to be trained to follow the system no matter what, even if they don't dislike it. They're trained to follow Freemasons. Eastern Stars are family members. They were initiated by being family members of men who were Freemasons. That's how the Eastern Stars were started. I won't go into all the details, but they are trained to basically obey and keep you in check, because it's part of keeping you programmed and brainwashed. And some people are broken the matrix, but this is also when some people ask, how do they infiltrate these organizations? You have to pay attention to these people who are part of these secret societies first. Even the fraternities and sororities, like AKAs, Alphas, Omega Psi Phis, Phi Beta Sigma, Zetas, Zeta Phi Betas, all of these different sororities and fraternities, they all link up under the craft. Up on Freemasonry is in a high pecking order, but you also have secret societies that are above Freemasonry, such as the supposedly the Shriners, the Knight Templars, the list goes on, etc. It's higher level secret societies. But I'm sorry, folks, I went over my time, but I wanted to give you guys empowering, action-packed information. I want to thank you for the questions. Thank you guys for joining me. It's much appreciated, as always. If you'd like to follow me, I'm on Facebook at Dorsey's Resource. I'm on Twitter at Dorsey's Resource, and of course on YouTube. Don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, hit the notification bell whenever I put out new videos. You can get updates, and don't forget the thumbs up. Until next time, everyone, take care.